Hi, my name's Jason Williams. You're watching another video from NJPW1. Sorry about the flies. Right, this build video is all about a homemade camper trailer that I built. I started building this in about, must have been somewhere around 2010, and you know, I quite like it. But what I'm going to do here is I'm introducing you to the trailer, just very briefly. And then I'm going to go through a whole heap of photos, because I've got photos, fairly detailed photos of how I built the trailer, and I'll do a voiceover and explain my steps as I went. And you know, the reason for doing this video is because shortly I'm going to start doing some mods to it, and I'm going to try to lighten it. I'm also going to improve the usability of it, and see how it goes from there. You know, this is probably one of my prouder builds as a young bloke. When I was quite young, well, you know, it was 2010, I suppose. It's 10 years ago, not that long ago. It's one of my prouder builds because it's something I built just out of what come to mind and some conversations with some people, and I come up with a plan, and you know, as well as some others, but you know, I just took what I could and what I learnt, and I begin to build it, and this is how it is, and I still use it. I still really like it as a trailer, as a camper trailer, and so I'll show you around, and I'll do like you know, I'll show all the videos coming next. So not videos, but photos coming up next, and you know, talk through it, and then I'll kind of recap it at the end, and see how we go. I forgot to bring the keys for it, so I can't open it up. But that'll all come in the modifications that I do for this trailer. It'll just go in some process, because some parts are getting a bit old, some things are a bit better than they used to be. And yeah, let's do it. So I began building this literally from the ground up. I built the chassis, and I welded on the spring hangers and put on these springs, which I later did have to change. The brakes I welded onto the axle, and all of these parts were 2-ton capable. So the bearings were 2-ton bearings, and the hubs were 2-ton bearings, as well as the axle. And the tyres, I think these were the offset of a Hilux. However, the width stayed the same width for my Land Cruiser. So once I had done that, I set it in place, flipped it over the other way, and began to weld on all the cross members on the trailer. And then I built a battery box that was so over-engineered and so overbuilt, and it's so heavy, but it worked. I then began to build a frame to house a 140 litre or 120 litre water tank in the deck of it, and this has proven to work well. I was quite surprised. I didn't really know what I was doing, but it worked. And from there, I've gone, and you know, I actually went out and bought some aluminium boxes to set on it, and then I made other frames to house the boxes to suit, and then mounted the boxes on the frame. I then went ahead and mounted a jockey for the drawbar, and you know, I again over-engineered that, and I over-engineered the hitch big time. I did over-engineer this and overbuild it. From there, I went on and began to build a tray, and this was the first time I ever built a tray on a trailer. And everything, you know, it took me a little while, but I got there. I then sandblasted and painted it, and I was surprised on how it turned out. It never looked this good again since. So I'll go through a few of these photos because, well, it never looked this good again. And even the frames underneath for the boxes, but some of these are no longer present. From there, I wired up the lights for the trailer, and all the other 12-volt accessories, I began to wire them up. I put a 270 amp AGM battery that weighed about 74 kilo, I think, and I put some lights in the toolboxes, and and wired up the front of the drawbar. And from there I began to wire up the other 12-volt accessories like a solar regulator, and I did put an inverter in here which will come in the coming photos. I then mounted this 120 to 140 litre water tank under the deck, and the mount worked better than I expected. I plumbed it all up and put it inside, and there's a pump which I'll show you that I can actually draw water from areas and run a shower and so forth, all that I need. I then built a very, very heavy fridge box that houses a National Luna 125 litre fridge. And you'll see I've made it so the fridge was stationary mounted to the deck, and so I had to access the controls through the side. And it opened from the top, which turned out to be really, really annoying. And this I did later change. And this fridge box, it was so heavy that by the time I changed it and made a new one, I'd reduced so much weight. And I'd made some vents, some makeshift vents. I made a few different types of vents, as you will see here. One was like some drilled holes, and then the next ones are like some of these maybe a little bit neater looking mesh type. But this I all did change, and you'll see that as this video develops. And I wired in the fridge, and I got it all pretty good. It used to carry 2 spares on the deck. And unfortunately, this is the only snippets of the solar system as I built it, as I forgot to take some decent photos. I hooked up the brakes, and I primed all the brakes and got them all nice. And then I also put in a power inverter and installed my Milwaukee battery charger. From there, I did begin, as you can see, I was loading it up with all the things and parts I need. I had oxy and so forth on the back. And I got ready to go do a job out in a remote Pilbara station, which was quite good. And I went out there and I had to build I was working on some cattle yards on a remote Pilbara station. I then went on my own little trip, and you'll see the springs are running a little bit low. And so I had to, I enjoyed my little trip out there, as you can see by the photos, and I took it home quickly so that I could put it back where I built it and cut the springs off, and I had to weld on a heavier duty set of springs. I then at a much later stage began to build a cage for it, which was welded some hinges on at the bottom, but it was held together with bolts up the top. And sure, that worked okay, but I soon replaced these with drop locks. However, as these photos continue, I was making all these bits and I welded the nuts in, and I used a rattle gun to operate it. I put some mesh on, and this it worked really well to carrying gear and equipment. It was really quite good, and I felt kind of chuffed, and I left it like this for a little while, but it didn't take me long. As you'll see in these next photos, I am actually using drop locks. So here I was on a trip in the southwest, and it didn't take me long before I realised I needed to lighten this trailer more and make it more usable with the fridge box, as well as the frame that held on the rooftop tent. As you can see, it was steel. So I actually started to make parts out of aluminium, as you'll see here as it develops. I removed the tank as well. I was making a new fridge box, and so I was lightening everything, took the tent off. Even the brackets underneath the water tank are replaced with aluminium. Almost everything, bits and pieces here and there. I still got a lot more to go, as you'll see here. And these frames did remain steel for a little while, but again, I did end up replacing them with aluminium, the same as the underneath. And this was the shed, I guess, I was working from, and these are some of the steel I removed, which actually made it a lot easier to use. And making the new fridge box with a Clearview drop slide to suit the 125 litre National Luna fridge. And I began cutting. This is me cutting, putting new vents in. And you know, this isn't very exciting. It was kind of a messy job, but I covered everything up the best I could, as I had to put the fridge slide in before I assembled the fridge box. And you know, there are some pictures here of how I did it, and you know, it seemed to work quite well. I wired it all up. I put a light in the lid, and this is the fridge box as it stands, finished on the back of the trailer. And I only carry now one spare on the trailer instead of two. And I also cut a hole in the deck of the tray so I could access and service that battery, even though 10 years later I didn't actually have to do anything to the battery. But this will change. There's something coming to change this as well. And this, you know, just accesses with a little aluminium lid. And you know, it was quite thirsty work, as you can tell here. And yeah, I was you know, quite chuffed. You know, I was fairly happy with the fridge slide and this fridge box. And so I went from here and I actually replaced the bearer that held on the rooftop tent, the bearers, and you know, made some out of aluminium, bent them up, and it was surprising how much weight I did actually remove by replacing things with aluminium. And so I was fairly excited. I then, again, I was loaded up here, as you can see, and I went on a trip throughout the wheat belt, which I've also got a video on my channel, sort of a photo video of all of these travels. And I've made a frame that houses my baby Webcue that clips in on the side of the trailer, as you can see here. And I use that cooking quite extensively most of the time. And you will see here how I use the water pump to run a shower that I hang off, or that is on the side of the Land Cruiser, and that works quite well. I've got a few photos here that I'll show very quickly. I have everything. It's a little bit messy. I was still ironing out some bits and pieces. And so this is the beginning of the overview for this, after you've just watched all the photos and the build of it. Anyway, to start with, I've got a treg hitch. You know, I've put some chains on, and you'll notice, you know, a lot of these things, like all the brake parts are rusted and old, and and it's overbuilt. You know, I did this quite a bit too young, but what I've lived out of this, like off grid. I actually lived in this thing, or from it, for for a couple of years, living off grid on a farm. And yeah, and I'll show this to you. This is the fridge box. In there is a 125 litre National Luna fridge. That's not split; it's just one compartment. And these are the sides. You see the sort of the rooftop tent that I used to have on my Hilux, 2009 Hilux, that I. As things go, you know, hard as a gas bottle, and yeah, it's pretty straightforward, but it's overbuilt. I overbuilt the crap out of this thing. You know, I so overbuilt it, and this box down here harbours the water pump, and it carries one spare. But I'll show all of these bits to you as I go. Oh, and what I should mention quickly, we'll go here, and just looking at this, I'm not sure if they pick it up on the camera, but what does it weigh? 1180. There you go. That's its tear weight. And when I licensed it, and I weighed it and licensed it at 1180 kilo, but that excluded that weight. It includes the fridge and a different fridge box that was much heavier. But I've made a much lighter fridge box, but I've also put a heavy drop slide in there. It didn't have the rooftop tent on, or any of that frame up the top, or the cage. Otherwise, everything else stayed the same. You know, it has a very large battery, probably a 270 amp hour battery. I'll poke under here, and you can see the frame that houses it. A 270 amp AGM battery from Australian Direct.